My name is Lena Marsh. I'm 36 years old, and I found out exactly what my husband's family thought of me at a Christmas party, written in my mother-in-law's handwriting on a gift tag in front of 31 people. The tag said, "Charity from the poor one." She smiled when she wrote it. I know because 3 different people told me later, separately, without knowing the others had seen it. My husband's name was on the gift too, but nobody mentioned that part. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was what was inside the envelope I had placed under that tree 6 weeks earlier, quietly, without saying a word to anyone. Not my husband, not my sister, not a single soul. Inside that envelope was a deed. Not a card, not a check, not a coupon for a spa day with a bow on it. A deed to a piece of property that had been sitting in my name for 4 years, waiting for the right moment to become something the whole family would one day need. By January, 2 of them would be calling me. Not to apologize, to ask. And what I said on that call closed something I didn't know I'd been carrying since the first Thanksgiving I ever spent in that house. Welcome to Hidden Family Revenge, where the people who got written off finally write the ending. If someone has ever put a price tag on you and gotten it catastrophically wrong, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell me when you realized you were underestimated. And subscribe, because this one builds slow and hits hard. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the Christmas party. Before that. You need to know who I was before that family got their hands on the story of me. I grew up in a town in eastern Tennessee that you won't find trending on any travel blog. 2 stoplights, a Dollar General, and a diner, where the coffee came in a mug that weighed half a pound. My mother worked the line at a textile plant for 22 years. My father drove trucks over the road and was home about 11 days a month. We weren't poor the way people romanticize poor. We were the kind of poor that meant you watched your mother count change in the car before going into the grocery store, and you learned not to ask for anything that wasn't on the list. I paid for community college by cleaning vacation rentals on weekends. Not because someone suggested it. Because I saw an ad on a corkboard at the library, and I did the math. By the time I transferred to a state university on a partial scholarship, I had 18 months of bookkeeping experience, a savings account with $4,000 in it, and a habit of reading financial statements the way other people read novels. Numbers felt honest to me in a way that people often didn't. A balance sheet doesn't have favorites. A profit margin doesn't care what town you came from. I loved that about finance the way some people love music. By 27, I was a commercial real estate analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in Nashville. Not glamorous, not the kind of job that makes people's eyes light up at dinner parties, but I was the person in the room who knew which properties were undervalued before anyone else said it out loud. And I was right often enough that it started to matter. That's where I met Caleb Harrington. Caleb was 31, easy laughing, the kind of handsome that reads differently in a suit than it does in a flannel shirt, and he was the same in both. He worked in commercial lending. We argued about cap rates on a Tuesday afternoon and went for drinks that Friday. I fell for him the way you fall for something that feels true, not fast, not dramatic, just certain. What I did not fully understand at the time was that falling for Caleb meant inheriting the Harrington family's very particular idea of what a daughter-in-law should look like. I was not it. The Harringtons were not wealthy in the way that means old money and quiet confidence. They were wealthy in the way that means everyone knows it, and everyone is supposed to know it. Robert Harrington, Caleb's father, had built a residential construction company over 30 years and sold it at 61 for a number he mentioned at dinner within the first 20 minutes of meeting me. His wife, Patricia, had the posture of a woman who had spent decades deciding who belonged in a room and who was there by accident. She decided about me in about 11 minutes. The first time I came to their house for dinner, Patricia asked me 3 questions. Where did I go to school? She didn't recognize the name. What did my parents do? She repeated, textile plant, the way you repeat a word in a foreign language to make sure you heard it correctly. And then she asked with a smile that hadn't reached her eyes since roughly 1987, whether I had always been interested in Caleb or whether I had learned about his family first. I told her I'd learned about his family approximately 45 seconds ago when I walked through the door. Caleb thought it was funny. Patricia did not. That was the blueprint for the next 4 years. The Harrington family operated on a system I recognized immediately because I'd grown up adjacent to its opposite. In my family, you earned respect by working hard and showing up. In theirs, you earned it by already having it. There was an invisible ledger, and everyone's net worth, pedigree, and social radius had a running balance. Mine started in deficit and stayed there, no matter what I did. Because the deficit wasn't really about money or credentials. It was about origin. I had come from the wrong place, and in Patricia Harrington's taxonomy, origin was permanent. Caleb's sister Bree was 2 years older, married to a corporate attorney named Dawson, and had a kitchen that had been photographed for a regional lifestyle magazine. She was not unkind to me exactly. She was the way certain people are when they've decided you're temporary, polite, slightly formal, never quite memorizing the details. She called me Layla twice in 4 years. My name is Lena. Caleb's brother Garrett was 29, functionally unemployed in a way that required a trust fund to make work, and was the family's golden son in absentia. He showed up to holidays with a new girlfriend every 18 months, and left before the dishes were done. Everyone thought he was charming. I thought he was allergic to consequence. Robert, the patriarch, was actually the most tolerable of all of them. He asked real questions sometimes and occasionally listened to the answers. But he deferred to Patricia on everything social, and Patricia had made her assessment. For 4 years I came to every holiday. I brought good wine and real gifts. I asked questions about people's lives and remembered the answers. I showed up early when Bree had her second baby and sat in a hospital waiting room for 3 hours because Caleb was stuck in traffic and she had said she was nervous. I drove Patricia to a cardiology appointment when Robert was traveling because she had mentioned it once offhandedly, and I had written it in my calendar. None of it moved the needle. At Christmas dinner the second year, Patricia introduced me to her sister as Caleb's girlfriend from Tennessee. I had been his fiancée for 4 months. At our engagement party, she gave a toast about how much she was looking forward to welcoming new energy into the family, and looked at Bree's husband when she said it. At the wedding, which I largely planned myself because Patricia's vision involved a budget that didn't account for the fact that Caleb and I were paying for it ourselves, she told 3 separate guests that I had simple taste. She meant it as a fact. It landed like a verdict. I wore my mother's pearl earrings. They were the only pearls I owned. I didn't say anything. I never said anything. Not because I was weak, because I was building something, and I needed my hands free. Here's the part I never told anyone, not even Caleb, not fully until much later. 3 years before the Christmas party, I have found a property. It wasn't glamorous. It was a 16-acre parcel on the edge of a small town 40 minutes outside Nashville. Agricultural zoning, a creek, on the south boundary a derelict farmhouse that had been vacant for 6 years. The county had been sitting on a back tax lien for 2 years, and nobody had moved because nobody had been paying attention. I had been paying attention. I knew that county. I had analyzed 3 commercial properties nearby. I knew the state infrastructure project that had been in planning for 18 months, a logistics corridor that would run through that region and make that particular stretch of 2-lane road significantly more valuable inside of 5 years. It was in a public transportation document that nobody reads unless you're the kind of person who reads public transportation documents for fun, which I am. I bought the parcel for $62,000 out of my own savings account, paid the back taxes, and filed the deed under a small holding company I had set up 2 years earlier for exactly this kind of quiet investment. Caleb knew I had the holding company. He knew I made occasional real estate investments. He didn't know the details of this one because I had learned early that describing a derelict farmhouse in agricultural county as a serious investment opportunity was a fast way to have a conversation I didn't have the energy for. The holding company was called Marshland Holdings. Marsh is my maiden name. I let that sit for 4 years. Now I need to tell you about the Christmas party, because that's where the fuse reached the powder. It was the 3rd year of our marriage, 2nd year in the new house. Patricia had started a tradition, and when I say tradition, I mean she announced it one October and acted as though it had always existed, of hosting a holiday open house for the extended Harrington family, their neighbors, and a rotating cast of people whose primary qualification seemed to be knowing what a Harrington was. 31 guests, caterers, a live pianist, a 12-foot tree that Bree and Patricia had decorated together. While I was in a closing meeting and learned about via text, I had spent 2 weeks on my gift for Robert and Patricia that year, not because I expected gratitude, because I had made a decision. The property I had bought 3 years earlier had appreciated exactly as I had projected. The logistics corridor had broken ground 8 months ago. A commercial developer had already approached Marshland Holdings twice about acquiring a portion of the acreage for a distribution staging area. The second offer had been significant. I had also learned something about the land that I had not known when I bought it, something the previous county records had not made obvious, and that only surfaced when I commissioned a full title search 18 months in. The farmhouse on the property sat on a parcel that had originally been subdivided from a larger tract that included land bordering a recreational reservoir. With the right variance application, the residential portion was buildable. What I had bought for $62,000 was now, conservatively, worth $420,000. Realistically, with the right development partner, more. I had decided to deed a portion of it, the residential buildable 5-acre section, with road frontage to Robert and Patricia. Not sell, deed. Because Robert had made a comment in March, quiet and uncharacteristic, about how he wished the family had a place to gather that didn't require hotels. His health had been uncertain the past year. 2 of his grandchildren had been born. He was, underneath all the performance of the Harrington machine, a man who wanted his family to have somewhere to come back to. I had that. I had built that. And I decided, in a moment of either profound generosity or profound naivety, that I would hand it to them. I printed the deed transfer documents. I put them in a cream envelope with a letter explaining the parcel, the location, the value, the access rights, and the development potential of the remaining 11 acres which I was retaining. I tied the envelope with a green ribbon, placed it under the tree 3 weeks before the party with a handwritten card on the front that said, "For Robert and Patricia, with love, Lena." I didn't tell Caleb what was inside. I told him I'd put something meaningful under the tree and that he should let it be mine to give. He agreed without asking questions, which is one of the things I love about him, and also one of the things that occasionally costs us. The party happened on a Saturday. I was late arriving because I had driven to Tennessee to pick up my mother, who had never been to a Harrington event before, and whom I had finally, after 3 years, invited because I was done making myself smaller to fit the space they'd assigned me. My mother wore her good navy dress. She brought a pound cake she'd made from scratch. She carried it like it was something. When we walked in, Patricia's face did a thing. Not a rude thing. A composed, controlled thing. The thing a face does when it has been trained to remain pleasant while reclassifying information. She took my mother's pound cake with both hands and set it on the kitchen counter and did not put it with the catered desserts. I noticed. My mother noticed. My mother smiled anyway, because she was raised to find the grace in things, and I felt something tighten in my chest that I hadn't expected. The gift opening happened at 7. Informal guests moving between the tree and the bar, the way the Harringtons did. Patricia managed the distribution, reading tags, handing parcels to the right people with commentary. She got to the cream envelope. She looked at the front. She read my handwriting. She looked at it for a moment longer than she needed to. And then she picked up the gift tag pen from the table. A little silver pen she used every year for last-minute labeling, and I watched her write something on a small blank tag from the basket and attach it to the ribbon on the envelope. She handed it to Robert without showing him what she'd written. She moved on. I was across the room. I didn't know what she'd written. I found out 20 minutes later when Caleb's cousin Tara came to find me in the kitchen with a look on her face that I can only describe as someone who has been asked to carry a live grenade and wants to put it down immediately. She'd seen the tag when Robert set the envelope on the side table. She read it. She found me. Charity from the poor one. 5 words in Patricia Harrington's precise looping script. I stood in that kitchen for 30 seconds without speaking. My mother was 3 feet away refilling her water glass. She didn't hear. I want to tell you that I felt rage. Rage would have been clean. What I actually felt was colder than that. The specific, clarifying cold of a person who has just been handed the final piece of information they needed and now knows exactly what to do with it. I put my water glass down. I walked back into the living room. I found Robert. He had not opened the envelope yet. I asked him if he'd step outside with me for a moment. He came. We stood on the back porch. December cold, the kind that bites at your ears. Robert had the envelope in one hand and his drink in the other. He was 64 years old, and tired in the way people get tired when they've been performing strength for a long time. I had noticed it in him over the past year. The way he sat at the edge of things sometimes. The way he asked about my work with what felt like genuine wistfulness, like a man who remembered when work felt like building something. I told him to open it. He did. Slowly. He unfolded the letter. He read it. He read it twice. He looked at the deed transfer documents, which were paper-clipped to the back. He ran his thumb over the legal description of the parcel. He looked at the property address, which meant nothing to him yet. He looked at the valuation estimate I had attached from the independent appraisal I'd commissioned in September. He set his drink down on the railing. He looked at me. I watched him try to find the right thing to say and not find it. His jaw worked. His eyes were bright in a way he probably didn't want me to see. "Why?" he said. I told him about the comment he'd made in March. About the grandchildren. About a place to come back to. I told him I had the land for 3 years and that this portion was the part I wanted them to have. He was quiet for a long time. "Patricia doesn't," he started. "I know," I said. "She isn't easy. I know that too." He looked at the documents again. "This is real. It's real. I had an attorney review the transfer. You'll want your own attorney to review it before you accept, and you don't have to accept it, but it's yours if you want it." He nodded. Not the performative nod people use when they're buying time. The slow nod of a man absorbing something larger than the moment. He didn't ask me about the tag. I don't know if he'd seen it. I didn't bring it up. We went back inside. Patricia was at the bar talking to Bree's husband. She glanced at Robert when he came back in, and I watched her read him the way people who have been married for decades read each other. She saw something that confused her. She looked at the envelope in his hand. She looked at me. I smiled at her. A real smile, not a performance, not revenge. The thing about handing someone a deed to $400,000 worth of land is that it doesn't leave much room for the appropriate follow-up expression to a gift tag that says, "Charity from the poor one." I want to stop here and say something honestly, the way I said it to my therapist 4 months later when I was finally making sense of the whole sequence. I didn't give that gift to prove anything to Patricia. I'd be lying if I said the timing was pure. It wasn't pure. I had chosen that Christmas specifically because I was tired of being managed, tired of being cataloged, tired of sitting at that table year after year and being the footnote in the story of the Harrington family. But the gift itself? The instinct behind it? That was real. Robert was a man who wanted something for his family that he didn't know how to ask for. I had it. I gave it. Those two facts were true, regardless of everything else. The tag Patricia wrote didn't change what was in the envelope. And what was in the envelope didn't change what was on the tag. Both things existed, and the room between them was where the rest of the story lived. What happened in January was the part I had not planned. The new year was 6 days old when Patricia called. I was at my desk reviewing a due diligence report. I saw her name on my phone and picked up because I always picked up, which is a habit I have since reconsidered. Her voice was different. Not the warm public voice, not the controlled formal voice, something stripped back. Careful in a way that meant she had rehearsed. She said she wanted to talk about the envelope. I told her I was listening. There was a pause. The kind of pause that costs someone something. She was not a woman who paid costs easily. She said that Robert had spoken with their attorney. She said the documents appeared to be in order. She said that they and I noticed. She said they, not I, appreciated the gesture, but that she had questions. I asked which questions. She said she wanted to understand why I had done it, what I expected in return, whether there were conditions attached. I told her there were no conditions. The deed transfer was clean. I retained the remaining 11 acres. They would own the 5-acre residential parcel outright, free and clear, with road frontage and the reservoir access, rights detailed in the legal description. Another pause. She said she didn't understand why someone would give away something worth that much without wanting something back. I told her that was a reasonable confusion if you had spent your life operating in a world where everything was transactional. And I said it without heat, without performance, just as a statement. She didn't answer that. Then she said, and I will keep this sentence with me for a long time, that she had expected, over the years, that I would eventually show my real motivations, that she had been waiting for the moment I revealed what I was actually after. I told her I had shown my real motivations every single time I showed up to her house, brought food her family actually liked, remembered her daughter's children's names and their allergies, and their teachers' names, drove her to a cardiology appointment on a Tuesday in February, because she had mentioned she was nervous. I told her those were my motivations, not a transaction. Just a person doing what people do when they're trying to be part of a family. The line was quiet for long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then she said something I had not expected. She said she had been wrong about the tag. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I shouldn't have done it." She said she had been wrong about it. Patricia Harrington using the word wrong in reference to herself was, I would later learn from Bree, something that had happened approximately twice in recorded family history. I told her I appreciated that. She asked if we could have lunch. I told her I was open to that. We didn't fix anything in one phone call. You don't fix 4 years in a phone call, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. But something shifted in the architecture of the thing, not demolished, not rebuilt, just shifted in a way that meant the doors were in different places, and you had to learn the room again. Let me tell you about Garrett, because he is a necessary chapter. Garrett called 3 weeks after Patricia, and his call was not the humbling phone call. His call was the other kind. He had heard about the property. He had Googled the parcel address. He had found the county assessor records. He had done some math, not good math, not careful math, but the specific math of a person who has recently realized that someone they had been underestimating has been making moves they missed. And he called me on a Tuesday morning while I was between meetings, and he led with, "So, you're apparently some kind of real estate investor now." The way he said apparently was instructive. It carried the specific register of a man who has been surprised, but would prefer not to appear surprised. I told him yes. He said he'd heard about what I'd given his parents. He said it was generous. Then, without transition, without preamble, he said he'd been looking at a property himself and could use some guidance. I want to be fair to Garrett. He wasn't malicious. He wasn't Patricia. He was just a man who had never had to develop instincts about people, because he had never had to. He moved through the world with the certainty of someone whose needs had always been anticipated, and it had produced in him a kind of breezy obliviousness that I think he genuinely mistook for charm. But I had spent 4 years at that family table watching him collect dividends he had not earned and leave before the work started. And I had watched the Harringtons treat that as a personality trait rather than a deficit. I told him I'd be happy to look at whatever he sent over. I told him my consulting rate was $350 an hour, with a 4-hour minimum engagement, paid in advance. Silence. Then, I'm family. I told him family was the reason I was giving him access to my time and expertise at all. But my time had a rate, and the rate was the rate. He said he'd get back to me. He did not get back to me. 4 months later, I heard through Caleb that Garrett had bought a property based on advice from a friend of a friend, overpaid by $60,000, and was now dealing with a zoning issue that would cost him time and money to resolve. A zoning issue that a proper due diligence review would have caught in the first 45 minutes. I said nothing. I filed it under tuition and moved on. There is something I need to tell you about my mother-in-law that I didn't understand for a long time, and that I only came to understand because of a conversation with my own mother on the drive back from that Christmas party. My mother is not an analytical person. She processes the world through feeling and story, through the weight of things rather than the measurement of them. She is not the person I call when I need to think through a financial model. She is the person I call when I need to be reminded of something true. On the drive home from the party, she sat in the passenger seat and looked out at the highway and said, after a long quiet, that Patricia reminded her of a woman from our town named Lena Marsh. No relation. Glenda had grown up desperately poor, married into the first family with money she could access, and spent the next 40 years performing distance from where she'd come from. She was the cruelest to people who reminded her of her own beginning. My mother said, "People who are ashamed of where they came from can't stand the sight of someone who isn't." I sat with that for a long time. I don't know Patricia's full history. I know fragments. I know she grew up in a mid-sized city, and I know she grew up in a mid-sized city in a working-class family. I know she worked as a bookkeeper before she married Robert. I know she doesn't talk about her family of origin in any detail, and when they do come up, her voice goes somewhere careful and contained. I'm not saying her cruelty was my problem to absorb. It wasn't. I'm saying that understanding where a wound comes from doesn't obligate you to let someone keep wounding you with it. Those are different things. I could understand Patricia and still hold my ground. The two were not in conflict. What she had written on that tag was her fear, not a fact about me. I had known that, some part of me, even in the kitchen at the party when Tara came to find me. What I had not known was that knowing it would feel the way it did, not victorious, not vindicated, just settled. Quiet in a way that doesn't need an audience. The lunch with Patricia happened in late February. We met at a restaurant she chose, which was fine. I had learned that giving Patricia some structural control of low-stakes decisions made the real conversations more possible. A woman who feels managed in small things gets rigid. A woman who chooses the restaurant sometimes says what she actually means. We sat down. We ordered. She looked at the menu for longer than she needed to, which I recognized as the move of a person who needs a moment before the difficult part. She told me, eventually, that Robert had been to the property twice. That he had walked the 5 acres, seen the reservoir access, stood on the ridge where the old farmhouse foundations sat. That he had cried once, briefly, when he called her afterward and described it. That he had not cried in front of her in 16 years. She said she didn't understand how I had known. I told her about the comment in March, about the grandchildren, about paying attention. She was quiet. I told her I had spent 4 years paying attention to a family that wasn't always paying attention back. I said it without accusation, just as a fact I was naming for the first time out loud in her presence. She looked at her water glass. She turned it in her fingers. She said, "I made it hard." "Yes," I said. "I made it hard from the beginning." "Yes. That wasn't." She stopped. Started again. "You never did anything to earn it." "No," I said, "I didn't." She nodded in a way that sat somewhere between acknowledgement and apology, the uncertain territory of a person who has not had much practice with either. I told her I wasn't asking for anything from her except honesty going forward. I told her I would rather have a real relationship with tension in it than a false one that was smooth. I told her I had liked Robert from early on, and I thought at times I had caught glimpses of someone underneath the performance that I could have liked too. She looked at me then. Really looked. The way people look when they aren't sure whether to defend themselves or accept what they've been handed. She didn't say thank you. She said, "You're harder to dismiss than I expected." I told her I'd been hearing that my whole life and I had made my peace with it. She almost smiled. We ate our lunch. We talked about the property. She asked me genuine questions about the development potential of the remaining 11 acres. Real questions, the kind she had probably been forming for 6 weeks and was only now allowing herself to ask. I answered them honestly. I told her what I knew and what I didn't, and when I didn't know something, I said so. At the end, she picked up the check before I could. She said, "The tag was beneath me." I told her I knew. She said, "I'm not sure I'll be easy to know." I told her I'd been cleaning vacation rentals since I was 19 and analyzing undervalued land parcels on my personal time since I was 27. Easy had never really been my benchmark. She put on her coat. She paused at the table before she left. "The pound cake your mother brought," she said. "It was the best thing on that table." She left. I sat there for a moment with the check she'd paid and a feeling I couldn't quite name. Not triumph, not warmth, something in between. The feeling of a thing that had been at a standoff for a long time, finally choosing a direction. Here's how it settled, because I know that's what you need. Robert and Patricia accepted the deed. Their attorney completed the transfer in March. Robert has been to the property 6 times. He is drawing plans for a small structure on the foundation site, not large, a gathering place. Bree's kids call it the farm. There is no farm. There is a creek and a ridge and a reservoir view and a man who found something he hadn't known how to ask for. Caleb knows the full story now. All of it. I told him on a Sunday evening in April from the beginning, the property, the Christmas decision, the tag, the porch conversation with Robert, all of it. He listened without interrupting, which was harder for him than it sounds. When I finished, he said, "Why didn't you tell me about the property earlier?" I told him I had been afraid that explaining it would turn into defending it, and I wasn't willing to defend something I knew was sound to people who hadn't done the work yet. He said that was fair, and that it cost him something to say so, and I told him I appreciated the honesty. We are better now than we were before that Christmas. Not because the property was dramatic or the lunch with Patricia was transformative, but because I finally stopped managing his family's feelings about me, and he finally stopped expecting me to. Bree called me in May. Not to ask for anything, just to talk. She asked about my work. She used my name correctly. She told me she had no idea about the property, and that when she found out, she had cried in her car in a grocery store parking lot, because she didn't know how to feel about a decade of assuming I was the one who didn't belong. I told her the decade wasn't lost. I told her we could just start from where we were. She said, "I've been calling you Layla in my head for 4 years. I said, "I know." She said, "I'm really sorry about that." I told her it was fine. It wasn't fine exactly, but it was workable, and workable is where real things get built. Garrett never called back about the property guidance. The zoning issue on his purchase was resolved, at cost. I heard it took 4 months and a significant attorney's fee. I am told he now asks more questions before he buys things. I am told not by anyone who would say it to my face, but by the particular osmosis of family information, that Patricia told someone at a spring luncheon that her daughter-in-law was in commercial real estate and had a real eye for it. She did not say where I went to school. She did not mention Tennessee. She said real eye for it, which, for Patricia Harrington, is a sentence that takes years to earn and costs her something to say. I'll take it. My mother's pound cake recipe uses buttermilk and brown sugar and a full stick of butter and is so good that it's actually embarrassing for everything around it at a dessert table. Patricia did not put it with the catered desserts the night of the party. By Easter, it was on the dessert table. I noticed. My mother noticed. My mother said nothing, because she finds the grace in things. I said nothing, because some corrections don't need to be said, they just need to be seen. The deed is recorded in the county property records. It will outlast the gift tag by several decades. When the Harrington grandchildren are old enough to run down to that creek and stand on that ridge and call it theirs, they won't know the full story. They'll just know there's a place to come back to. That's enough. That was always enough. Here is the only thing I'll leave you with, because I don't believe in lessons that wrap too cleanly. The people who write you off in ink, with a small silver pen and a looping hand, are usually writing their own fear, not a truth about you. Their fear pressed flat onto a tag and tied to a ribbon. And you cannot argue someone out of a fear that old. You cannot perform your way past it. You cannot be generous enough or competent enough or present enough to force a reckoning on someone else's timeline. What you can do is keep building what you're building, quietly, correctly, with receipts. And when the moment comes, and if you keep building, it comes, you don't have to say a word. You hand them the envelope. You let them open it. You stand on a cold porch and watch a man read a document that tells a different story than the one his family has been telling about you for 4 years. And you let the numbers be what they've always been, the only ones in the room that never had an agenda. That's my story. A deed, a tag, and a pound cake that was better than everything else on the table. If this reminded you that what you're building is worth building, even when no one is watching, take that as your sign and go work on it today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge. I'll see you in the next one.